Hello, everybody, and welcome to Boxy Banter. I'm your host, Billy Ballas, a longtime baseball coach and a season ticket holder of the LA Dodgers. So today's episode is going to be a little interesting. I'll try to be as fair and positive towards the Giants as possible. And I am broadcasting today from McCovey Cove on a kayak out here in the shadows of Oracle Park. Joining me today on this two-man kayak is Matt Hutchison. He's a firefighter up in the Bay Area. And his claim to fame as a Giants fan is the Giants are undefeated when he attends a postseason game. And that includes World Series games in 2002, in 2010, in 2014, as well as Game 7 of the 2012 NLCS. He was unable to attend a NLDS game back in 2003 against the Marlins, and he was so angry when Jose Cruz Jr. dropped a routine pop fly. He wrote Jose Cruz Jr.'s name on a ping pong ball and was whacking it around his dorm room in anger. Matt Hutchison, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here.
Billy, thank you so much. I appreciate you letting all your listeners know about my temper. I am not joining you in a kayak. That is freezing. I'll be inside the stadium.
Where it's much warmer?
At least a couple degrees.
And yeah, we definitely appreciate your service as a firefighter, especially everything that's going on right now. The skies in San Francisco are orange, matching the Golden Gate Bridge and the color of the Giants, but it's definitely not something that you'd want to see with all of the circumstances.
Definitely a bizarre time. Thank you for that.
All right, so we are here talking about the Giants, and they are, one of the blue bloods in baseball. They go back to 1883. They started as the New York Gothams, and then they changed to the Giants in 1885. A manager kind of attributed the large size of some of their players, and the name kind of stuck. So they've been the Giants since 1885. They were in there in New York until 1958. And in 1959, along with the Dodgers, they moved out west. They weren't actually originally going to move to San Francisco. Matt, do you know where they were going originally?
Somewhere even colder for you, Billy.
Minnesota. Yeah, they were originally looking to move to Minnesota. I believe they had a AAA team, one of their minor league teams in Minnesota. So they were going to move there. But Old Man O'Malley, the owner of the Dodgers, he was moving to LA. And he told the Giants, like, hey, I'm going to LA. Why don't you go to San Francisco? We'll renew the rivalry out west. We'll both be out there. And so, yeah, the Giants moved out west to San Francisco, beginning play in 1959. They played at Seals Stadium, which was the home of the minor league Seals team there. They played there until they moved into the Candlestick in 1960. Not the best stadium there. Have you been to many games at the Stick, Matt?
I sat through a lot of games as a kid, miserable, either freezing to death at night in the wind or just baking in the sun during the day.
So they were there until 1999. And then in 2000, they moved into originally Pac-Bell Park. Then it was SBC Park. Then it was renamed AT&T Park. And now it's on its fourth name, Oracle Park, there in San Francisco, right there on the water in the China Basin. A beautiful park and a huge upgrade from the Stick, wouldn't you say?
Oh, definitely. And something that's not really known that much about the Stick is everybody knows about the 89 earthquake, right? But not a lot of people know that between the 88 and 89 season, they actually went through a seismic retrofit, preparing for such a problem. It just so happened that very good timing on that. And my dad and brother were at that game in 1989.
Wow, that must have been something.
Luckily, I was too young to understand.
All right, so they've been at, again, what's now Oracle Park since 2000. And part of their time there, they've had between 2010 and 2017, 530 consecutive sellouts, which is second only to Boston and Fenway Park in terms of the longest consecutive sellout streak. Now, in the past quarter century, the time period that we generally talk about here on Box Seat Banter, they have 5 division titles: 97, 2000, 03, 2010, and 2012. They've got a trio of wild card appearances: 02, 2014, and 2016. And they've won the pennant 4 times here in the past quarter century: 02, 2010, 2012, and 2014. And in 3 of those pennants, they won the World Series: 2010, 2012, 2014. Those are their first and only 3 titles in San Francisco. In New York, they previously have 5, going all the way back to 1905, in 1921, 22, 33, and then in 1954, where Willie Mays made that great catch in Game 1 of the World Series. So Matt, you mentioned attending World Series and postseason games there. They've had a lot of success in the postseason. Must have been a lot of fun being at those games.
Yeah, in 02, I was in high school, and one of my best buddies growing up called me up at 7 o'clock in the morning before we were supposed to get to school, which was out of the ordinary. But luckily it was with the good news that we got tickets. We're going. And ever since experiencing that once, I wanted to go every time I had a chance again. Unreal atmosphere. I know you with the Dodgers have had a lot of chances to enjoy it recently. Hopefully we'll get back there and take that throne back.
There's nothing quite like postseason baseball. So they've had a lot of postseason in the past quarter century. So we'll talk about some of that, as well as some of their other past trials and tribulations, along with their successes going forward here, the rest of the podcast. Matt, we will begin here with the trivia question. And last week on the program, we talked about the Rockies, and the trivia question was, who are the 9 Rockies to win the batting title? There were 9 different ones. And normally I throw it out to my guests, even though Matt, you're not the Rockies guy, I generally throw it out to you for a guess. But I know you were listening to the program last week, and you heard our guest, Anthony Masterson, name off all 9 of them. He didn't leave that open for anybody there, but they were a reminder for everyone. Andres Galarraga, Larry Walker, who did it 3 times, Todd Helton, Matt Holliday, Carlos Gonzalez, Michael Kadire, Justin Morneau, DJ LeMahieu, and Charlie Blackmon. So quite a impressive list there to have 9 batting titles. And as we discussed last week, Coors Field definitely a huge part of that, but a lot of great hitters there as well. And this week, now one of the very cool, interesting things about Oracle Park is you have a fairly large body of water as a target. McCovey Cove, and when certain players were wearing the orange and black for the Giants, that would be filled with people in kayaks just waiting for those splash hits, as they are called. There have been 82 splash hits by Giants since they've moved into Oracle Park in 2000. And there are 4 Giants who have hit at least 3 splash hits. Matt, how many of those 4 can you name?
Well, you did me a big favor there by pulling a stat that happened after the year 2000. So we have to go with Barry Bonds. That's a no-brainer. I would say I got to pick lefty bats because there's not a lot of right-handers that are hitting them out over the wall into the water. So I'll take Brandon Belt. I'll take Brandon Crawford, and splits his time, but I'll take Pablo Sandoval, maybe throwing his gut into a couple of them and getting them over the fence.
All right. So those are good guesses. Definitely. All those guys had a lot of ABs for the Giants, a lot of big home runs. I won't reveal the answer. I will say that you have at least 2 correct. I won't say which 2 those are. You may have more than 2. You did not get all 4. I'll say you did not get all 4, though. At least two correct. Now, our listeners, if any of you guys want to throw guesses out there, you can do so on Twitter, on Instagram. It's at Boxy Banter on both of those platforms, and we will reveal the answer next week. Now, the Giants were owned by Peter McGowan. He bought the team from Bob Lurie in 1993. He actually kept the team in San Francisco. So, originally they were almost never going to come to San Francisco. They were going to Minnesota. And then they almost left San Francisco in 93. They were going to move to Tampa. But Peter McGowan bought that team, and he was able to keep them in San Francisco. There's a great picture of Brandon Crawford as a young child at like one of those final games at the Stick. Matt, have you seen that picture?
I have. Holding up the sign.
Yeah, it's like wearing his little backwards cap. What did the sign say? Like, please don't leave or something like that?
Yeah, let them stay or please don't leave.
Yeah, then I think didn't he like recreate that picture again like more recently?
He did, yeah.
So as a Giant fan, it's always fun, to see like a local kid who grew up rooting for the team and then have a lot of success with the team.
Yeah, not too far away, and probably a guy that you can't hate too much, right? UCLA product.
Yeah. So Peter McGowan was the owner from 93 to 08. Then Bill Newcomb owned the team from 08 to 2011. And then the current CEO and owner is Larry Baer. Matt, you have any comments on any of those owners? And again, reminder that it's a family show, so we don't want to be too negative on Larry Baer with some of the news that he's been in recently.
Yeah, I think Larry just needs to behave himself and not wrestle over phones. And thank you, Peter McGowan, for keeping him in San Francisco, giving me something to cheer for besides the Oakland A's, because you can't walk in that stadium without a tetanus shot.
Yeah, it's the Giants definitely belong in San Francisco. It's nice having, the Giants and Dodgers out here on the West in my opinion, the best rivalry in baseball. Now, the general managers that the Giants have had in the past quarter century, they had Bob Quinn from 93 to 96, and then Brian Sabean, a long run from 96 to 2014, Bobby Evans from 2015 to 2018, and then their new president of baseball operations, Farhan Zaidi, who worked under Billy Beane for the A's for a while. Then the Dodgers stole him away. Then the Giants offered him a contract to be their president of baseball ops, and he moved back home, back up to the Bay. Matt, any opinions on any of the GMs?
I wasn't too keen on Farhan just because I don't want anything coming from the Dodgers. We like to send you our old guys more so than the other way.
He got his roots in Oakland though, so that's got to be a positive, right?
That is fair, but I'll tell you that he's done a lot with a little, I feel like, and he's made him competitive. He's made him fight and play hard, and I appreciate that.
And what about Sabean there? I mean, he had a long run and a lot of success. He was there for the pennant winners in 02, 2010, 2012, and 2014, 3 World Series rings. I mean, he didn't do it in the way that most teams are being built these days.
Yeah, he was always willing with a contender or somebody he thought was close to go out and make a deal and try to go after the next bat that was going to get him over the hump, the next pitcher that was going to get him over the hump. Much to the chagrin of a guy like Farhan that builds up a farm system, Brian had no problem depleting it for sure.
Well, flags fly forever, and if you're able to get that flag, I think it's worth it. And he was able to. It seemed like he had a knack for just finding a guy who would then, go off for a couple months and then, be instrumental in a postseason run, and then kind of never really heard from again.
Yeah, I mean, 2 names that come to mind right off the bat are Cody F. Ross, I think was his nickname, and Pat the Bat Burrell. Picking up those 2 guys out of nowhere and getting a lot of success out of them in the World Series run.
Yeah. So, but as you mentioned, it kind of sold off the farm system, and then they've kind of been in rebuild mode after that wild card in 2016. But yeah, so we'll see what Farhan can do now. He had a lot of experience on successful organizations in Oakland and in LA. So yeah, we'll see what that's like going forward there.
Yeah, and the other thing with Sabian is he had a lot of loyalty to homegrown talent and was willing to give sizable contracts to guys late in their career. I think of like a Tim Lincecum, a Matt Cain, um, where other people might cut bait and let go. A lot of the nostalgia and the, you know, what you did for me in the past held weight with him, which, I mean, if you're buying jerseys and you're a fan of those guys, you like that. But at the same time, you realize that that's not necessarily the best path to the future always.
Great points. Now let's look at some of their field managers. I've got a tidbit, and let's see if you can identify the manager from this fact about him. Let's go back where they had a manager who is currently, he actually owns a winery now.
That's the whole tidbit. You can't give me like 3 other little nuggets.
Well, okay, he's been a manager for several teams, and I've like wasted a bunch of facts about him on prior questions on prior podcasts.
The person I can picture the most out of that group, Craig, Baker, Lou, Bochy, and now Kapler would be Bochy drinking wine, but that's just a total guess.
It's Dusty Baker.
That's good for Dusty.
Yeah, and I would have mentioned the name of the winery, but it really would have given it away. It's Baker Family Wines.
I might have got that one.
Okay, now they had a manager who actually, it's interesting because now we're recording this podcast on September the 9th, but it is being released on September 15th. So if you're listening to this on the day that it is released, you are listening to it on the day that this particular manager, as a player in 1963, was part of the only all-brother outfield in Major League Baseball history for the Giants. And he also has a son who is a big league manager currently. So do you know
Felipe Alou?
Yes, Felipe Alou with his brothers Matty and Jesus were all three started in the same outfield together on this day, September 15th, 1963. And he's got like 10 kids. Luis Rojas is one of his kids. He's currently the Mets manager. It's interesting, like the names there, because obviously his son Moises Alou has the same last name, but I think there was some confusion when they came over, and Rojas is technically his last name, but they were kind of mistakenly called the Alous. All right, moving on. This next manager was the first foreign-born manager to reach the World Series and the first European-born manager to win the World Series.
Bruce Bochy.
Yes, he was born in France on an army base. So back in '98 with the Padres, he was the first foreign-born manager to reach the World Series. They did not win it that year. And then in 2010 with the Giants, when they won, that was the first time a European-born manager. So sometime in between there, a different foreign-born manager won the World Series. And that brings us to the current manager of the Giants, who at age 8 was hit by a car crossing the street. And he had such a fear of crossing the street, he needed therapy to overcome then crossing the street again. Who would that be?
Well, you said current manager. It's Gabe Kapler.
That's correct. That's correct.
Good hit.
He also is known for being a fitness freak, and to maintain his like 4% body fat, he'll eat ice cream, but he just with a cup, and he like licks the ice cream and he like spits it into a cup.
That's bizarre.
Yeah, that's true. That's your manager. So what do you think about him?
Man, I'm already fighting hard just to like the guy, and you're gonna tell me something like that he licks cups and spits out the ice cream?
Yep.
Does he keep his toenails in a jar under his bed too?
I'm not sure about that. So, I mean, what are the early returns on Kepler here?
You know, they called him. They were talking about him on the radio the other day. They were calling him Gabe Gaffler because I guess he makes a lot of mistakes. But the credit that I'll give him is that the guys are playing hard this year, and the Giants are finally producing runs and hitting the ball. I don't, if you're gonna blame him for the failures, you gotta praise him for the successes too. So I'm open.
Yeah, I think the jury set a lot out on him. He did not have a lot of success in Philadelphia. I'm not sure how much of that was his fault, but he took the blame for it, and he got axed there. Now, the three prior managers, Baker, Alou, and Bochy, I mean, those are all great managers, a lot of success there in the Bay. I mean, Bochy's got to be a hero there in San Francisco, right?
Absolutely. And when you were telling the story of his birth, I was trying to figure out what size hat he might have worn when he was born. Probably like an 8 3/4 then, because I think he finished his career with probably like a 12.
Yeah, and he was a catcher when he played, and I think like one time he got traded or something. I think they didn't have a helmet big enough for him, and they had to like get the helmet from his previous team and something like that. But yeah, he's known for having a huge dome.
Big old dome.
So those are the managers, and then coming right up, we'll look at the players from the past quarter century. So let's look back on the past quarter century and this roster for the Giants I have assembled. Quick reminder to all our listeners out there, the rules for putting this roster together, you go back 25 years. So in this case, we're going back to 1995. You pick one player per year. You cannot repeat players, and you must form a coherent roster. And if you get inspired to form your own roster, whether it's for the Giants or any other team, you can go ahead and visit the website, boxseatbanter.com. There's a link to download a template on Google Spreadsheets. You can download that and make your own roster. And if you do, go ahead and submit it. We would love to see those. So we will start right off at the catching position. And there's an obvious choice there at catcher for the Giants. That's Buster Posey in 2012, his MVP winning year. He was worth 7.6 wins. He hit 24 home runs, 39 doubles, drove in over 100, led the league in batting at 336, got on base at a 408 clip and slugged 549, led the league in OPS plus at 171. So you're getting a lot of great offensive production there out of a position that generally does not produce it. So, Matt, what do you got on Posey?
I love the guy. He's a guy that picks up his lunch pail and goes to work. I know he's not going to get a ton of fanfare, but he's not a look at me type of guy. But I love him. And since you like to throw out the trivia, let me throw one back to you. Buster's not his name, obviously. I don't think any parent would really do that to their kid. But can you give me his full name?
I think it's I'm not sure his middle name, but it's Gerald. Gerald, is it like Dempsey Posey or something?
The third. You got it, Gerald Dempsey Posey the third. Very good.
Okay. Then moving along to first base, we've got JT Snow in 04. We're 3.3 wins, not a lot of pop, just 12 home runs, hit 32 doubles. Great OBP though, 327, 429, 529, triple slash, and just a smooth fielder over there at first base. Moving along to second base, Jeff Kent in 2000. We got another MVP year for the Giants. He was worth 7.2 wins, 33 home runs, 41 doubles, drove in 125, triple slash of 334, 424, 596. So another instance where you got a lot of offensive production from a position that does not generally produce it.
And luckily, that was I don't think that was the year that him and Barry were trying to punch each other out in the dugout. So everything worked out.
What year was that?
I think it was a couple years later because it wasn't long before he left.
Then at third base, going back to 1995, Matt Williams. He's worth 4.6 wins, 23 home runs. And this was coming off the year when he was threatening to break the Roger Maris's record. I think he had like 41 or 42 home runs there in 94 in the strike shortened 94. I think he was on pace right around like 61 or so. But in 95, he's still solid. 336, 399, 647, triple slash. He was an all-star that year. And at shortstop, Rich Aurelia led the league in hits in 01 with 206. He hit 324, 369, 572, worth 6.7 wins. Then as we get to the outfield, Barry Bonds in 02. Now, there's a lot of different Bonds years you could have gone with. I went with 02. It was not the year where he hit those 73 home runs, but he was worth 11.7 wins, led the league. It was one of his, what did he win, like 7 MVPs or something like that?
Yeah.
This was one of his MVP years. He led the league in walks. Crazy, crazy numbers. Some guys don't get this many walks in their career. 198 walks. Led the league in batting at 370, on base at 582, slugging at 799, OPS at 1381, and OPS plus at 268. And he was intentionally walked 68 times. He hit 46 home runs in the times that he was able to swing the bat. What do you got on Bonds, Matt?
I think, thank goodness for a guy like Barry Bonds trying to put this roster together for the Giants, because there were a lot of lean years where having the flexibility to basically say, I'll take any one of Barry Bonds' years was pretty nice. It's nice to see that the Giants are bringing him back into the fold a little bit more, getting him more involved with the club. There was a time they took down all mention and homage to him in the park, and it's nice to see that stuff starting to come back.
It is kind of interesting to see how some of these players from that era are treated these days. A lot of them have been shunned from the Hall of Fame so far. We could discuss whether Bonds should be a Hall of Famer or not. That could be an entire podcast episode. But guys like Bonds, McGwire, they have not been in the Hall of Fame, but they both had been coaching in baseball. I think Bonds was the Marlins hitting coach for a short time. Mm-hmm. McGwire served on the coaching staff in LA and San Francisco.
I think if you and I start that debate, we'll probably either A, end up not friends anymore, or B, neither one of us will go to bed tonight.
All right. Well, and you mentioned Bonds, it kind of makes it easy to make up for some of the lean years there. I mean, huge numbers. He's going to have to carry the outfield, because as we move along here, in center, I've got Andrew McCutchen in 2018. He was worth 1.9 wins. He did hit 15 home runs, 28 doubles, but not quite the Andrew McCutchen from his prime in Pittsburgh.
And McCutchen was a tough one for me, because watching him in Pittsburgh, and there was years the Giants were going to have to play them in a wild card or coming down the stretch that they were both going to be close. I loved him. I loved Andrew McCutchen. I always wanted him on my team, but by the time it finally happened, there was nothing around him, and he's in a little bit in the twilight, and there's nothing, no support around him, and so I feel like it was a wasted year with him, and unfortunately, I didn't even get to enjoy him.
Yeah, that one did not work out as well as the previous star outfielder for the Pirates to move along to the Giants. And then finishing up the starting outfield, Hunter Pence in right in 2013, worth 3.8 wins, 27 home runs, 35 doubles, triple slash of 283, 339, 483. And my favorite line on Hunter Pence, one from the great Vin Scully, is that Hunter Pence makes coffee nervous. The way he's always he's wired so tight and just always kind of bopping around.
He is. He's an absolute fan favorite in San Francisco. He's like Tim Lincecum. He can go to any restaurant. He can show up at any time, and everything's on the house. Watching his inspirational speeches in the dugout, keeping those guys hyped up for games. And, I mean, just giving hope to the average guy. I mean, you run like that, you throw like that. I feel like I can get out there and do it, and then I remember that I can't. But love Hunter Pence.
All right, then moving along to the bench as a backup catcher, I've got Brent Mayne from 99. Not a lot of great offensive numbers, but he was above average with the stick, 111 OPS plus, solid defender. He was worth 2.2 wins back there. Aubrey Huff in 2010, he was worth 5.7 wins. He had 26 home runs, 35 doubles. I'm not sure if we need to talk about his social media recently. We'll leave that for everyone else.
You talk about a guy that's been shunned by the team. He's not invited to any of the parties anymore.
Yeah, I can see why. We've got the Kung Fu Panda, I believe another fan favorite up there, Pablo Sandoval in 2011. He was worth 6 wins, 23 home runs from the switch hitter, a triple slash of 315, 357, 552. I mean, just a great bad ball hitter in the, Vlad Guerrero, Yogi Berra mold. He's just able to hit anything.
Yeah, he's a guy that would swing above the shoulders down at the laces. But I know you picked him in 2011, but let's just give a shout out to 2012, 3 home runs in the World Series, 4 for 4 on the day, 2 off of Verlander and 1 off of Albuquerque. That's a game I'll never forget.
I think him, Ruth, and did Pujols do it? I think those are the only 3 with 3 home runs.
I think he did, but I think Pablo was the only one to do it in his first 3 at-bats.
And I remember one of those you mentioned, 2 off of Verlander. One of those was like off. You mentioned swinging at anything at shoulders. It was like a high fastball at his shoulders. It's unbelievable that he was able to get to that pitch. And so he's swinging at anything. And then finishing up the infield, I've got Brandon Crawford in 2015. He was worth 5.8 wins. He was an All-Star, Gold Glover, and Silver Slugger that year as he hit 21 home runs. And the backup outfielder, I've got Mike Yastrzemski from 2019. Now, last year he was worth 2.8 wins, 21 home runs. He was kind of the one bright spot for them last year, and it looked like it seemed like a nice story. Then this year he's been even better.
Yeah, he's given them some hope for sure. He's trying to keep himself in the MVP discussion. I know it's not outside the realm of possibility, especially if they go on a run and make the playoffs for a team that looked like they weren't going to do anything. I'd like to see something like that happen, but definitely good to have a young guy like that to get the fans excited again.
All right, so what do you think about the position players just as a whole? We can later on, we'll discuss some of my misses and that kind of stuff, but just, what do you think of this lineup here?
When I went through it, I fell into the pitfalls of going with my heart a little bit more, but you and I have a lot of similarities. You hit a lot of the players that I would have hit. You can't ignore 3 MVP years. You got to put them in there. So those guys are going to make it. Rich Aurelio was a no-brainer. Matt Williams, no-brainer. So we hit a lot of the same spots.
All right, now let's get to the pitching staff. Starting off with Jason Schmidt in 2003. He went 17-5. Led the league with a 2.34 ERA, also led the league in WHIP at about 0.95 and an ERA plus at 180. He was an all-star that year for the Giants. Then that fan favorite that you mentioned, Tim Lincecum in 2008. He was worth 8 wins. He went 18-5, 2.62 ERA, and it was a Cy Young that year. I think he won it in 2008, 2009, 2-time Cy Young winner, but I took his 2008 year. What do you got on Timmy?
I love Timmy. He's another guy that gives the average guy hope, right? Slight build, not a huge guy, but gets the absolute most out of his body. And when he showed up a couple years ago, they had some function for the Giants commemorating World Series, and he showed up, and the fans went absolutely nuts. But he's not a guy that seeks the limelight. He actually goes and hides like a hermit, but love Tim Lincecum.
All right, and then the next pitcher is another guy who I'm sure the Giants fans love, Madison Bumgarner. I got his 2014 year. He went 18-10, ERA just under 3. But back to Timmy though. I didn't get to all the stats he led the league in. 265 strikeouts led the league. Led the league in ERA plus, in FIP, in hits per 9, strikeouts per 9, 10.5 strikeouts per 9, home runs per 9. He kept the ball in the yard, and just 7.2 hits per 9. And then Bumgarner in 2014, like I mentioned, so he had about a strikeout per inning. Great strikeout to walk at a hair over 5 strikeouts to walk. And then obviously that was the year where he had that great playoff run. Generally, when I put these rosters together, I focus on, regular season stats. But that year, I did take into account the postseason, and that was how I picked his year that year. What do you got on Mad Bum?
Just a hell of a competitor, a lot of fire. I mean, that 2014 run was a get on my back and I'm going to take us to the finish line kind of a thing. Just a refusal to lose, a refusal to give in on any at bat, any hitter. He'll take on anybody, and I love it.
How do Giants fans feel now that he is, on a division rival on the Diamondbacks these days? And he just the other day started, I think it was in San Francisco, made a start against the Giants. No fans were there, so they were unable to salute him. But how do Giants fans feel about him being on another team?
I don't think that going to Arizona is going to hurt him too much with the fans. I think when fans are back in the stadium, he'll get a standing ovation and he'll get the love that he deserves. Had he gone to the Dodgers or something, you'd have a mixed bag. But I think ultimately they stand up for Madison Bumgarner. They did beat Bumgarner and hit back-to-back home runs off of him, so that softens the blow a little bit.
Yeah, he's gotten off to a rough start there in Arizona. Are they glad that they didn't re-sign him to that huge contract? Or, is he a guy that you would have liked to see a Giant for life, even if he's not performing like he used to?
I think that goes back to the philosophical change we talked about with Farhan versus like a Brian Saban, where it's, it'd be nice to keep your childhood favorites forever, but that's not the way you build an organization that remains competitive. And I think that you'll have a split with the fans that wanted to keep him and the fans that realized it was probably the better move.
Absolutely. Good points. Moving along in the rotation, Johnny Cueto from 2016. He went 18-5, 2.79 ERA, led the league with 5 complete games. And then finishing up the rotation, Sean Estes, the lefty, in 97, he was worth 4.2 wins, went 19-5, 3.18 ERA. Somehow had a ERA that low when he led the league in walks with 100, but that's the rotation that I've got here. How solid do you think that rotation is?
I do like it. Estes doesn't get me too excited, but there were lean years, so you got to do what you got to do. Cueto is a guy I like to watch. He's entertaining. He's interesting with his shimmy and his pauses and all that kind of stuff. But he's not a guy that I think has ever really won over the Giants fans, or at least me. It doesn't seem like he's one of us, and I think some of that's been broken up by the injuries and whatnot. And then not having good teams around him. But he's another guy that I feel like we've kind of wasted, like McCutchen.
Now we'll get into the bullpen. I got Rod Beck from 96, saved 35 games that year for the Giants. Rob Nen in 98, he was worth 3.3 wins, ERA of about 1.5. He saved 40 games for the Giants, struck out 110 guys in 88 innings, good for 11.2 K9. Scott Air, the lefty, in 05, led the league in appearances at 86. He had a 2.63 ERA across 68 and a third innings. What do you got on these guys?
Rob Nan, Rod Beck, just studs for the Giants. They'll always be fan favorites. Scott Air, when you sent me the roster and I looked at it, I was like, who the heck is Scott Air? But I think the only thing I can really remember about him is he had a real good breaking ball. And I do remember that there was a year where they just rode him like crazy.
And then we've got Jeremy Affeldt, another loogie, in 09. He was worth 2.6 wins. He made 74 appearances, 62 and a third innings, 1.73 ERA. Struck out 80 guys. 55 guys. So not a huge strikeout number, but he's came in and he got lefties out. Kevin Correa, Cal Poly Mustang, got him in 07, 2.2 wins there. He made 59 appearances, started 8 games there, so he could be a swing man out of the bullpen there. 101 and 2/3 innings there, so he can give you multiple innings. Corey Guerin in 2017, sub 2 ERA, 68 appearances, 68 innings pitched. So he'll give you a solid inning every time out. And finishing up with Steve Klein in 06. He was worth 1 win, 72 appearances, another loogie, 51 and 2/3 innings. So there's the rest of the staff. So what do you think of this pitching staff? I know there's some guys who I did not include, and we'll get to those in a later segment, but what do you think on these guys?
Yeah, I think with the Giants, it was hard to get the guys that everybody loved in there to pitch on years where basically you had nobody to play the field if you were going to use up that year. But I think you did a nice job of trying to round it out and get some guys in there. I like it.
All right, thanks. And that's the roster I've assembled. And yeah, in a moment here, we'll look at your roster, Matt, and we'll talk about my misses. Anytime I put one of these rosters together to get, the pieces to fit, there's a lot of tough decisions that I got to make. So I know that the guys listening are probably yelling and be like, oh, how could you have gotten this guy and not this guy? Let me have it if there's any disagreements there on Twitter, on Instagram, at Boxy Banter on both those platforms. Matt, I like to listen to a lot of podcasts, and there's a lot of people out there, a bunch of idiots, and I'm yelling at these guys for all the mistakes they're making. So I know people out there that are thinking, this Ballas guy's an idiot. So yeah, let me have it. I'm eager to hear all those mistakes that I've made, and I'm going to hear them right now because Matt, you made a roster for the Giants, and let's see what you got. You can point out some of my mistakes as we go over your roster. So what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to be screaming that I'm an idiot, you can turn off your microphone and just listen. That'd be fine with me. A lot of what I have is going to line up with a lot of what you had. I think I said earlier, I let my heart dictate a couple things and put me in a position where I had to take some guys that weren't in the best spot, but just guys I always liked watching. Start off 95, I had Matt Williams at third base. 96, Rod Beck in relief. 97, I took JT Snow, so we had him much different years. He had a long stretch with the Giants, so a lot of years to choose from. 98 from my bench, I had Marvin Bernard. Not a guy who's going to make a lot of people excited, but I can remember watching him as a kid and always just thinking, man, that guy tries hard. And I like that. 99, Rob Nen. 2000, obviously, Jeff Kent in his MVP year. 2001, Rich Aurelia. That's right in line with you. 2002, I took Kirk Reeder.
Woody.
Affectionately referred to as Woody. Another guy that just went to work and did his job, and everybody loved watching him. Jason Schmidt, I took in 2003. I think a little bit different than the year that you had him in 2003, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there was a stretch of years there that you could take Jason Schmidt where he was, always in the top 3 or 4 or whatever it was, and strikeouts and power pitcher and fun to watch.
I feel like Schmidt is underappreciated. I mean, he was really good there for a stretch, and people don't really talk about him anymore.
Yeah. 2004 was my Barry Bonds year. Like we talked about, you could probably throw a piece of pen at a piece of paper and find a year to put Barry Bonds in, you'd be just fine. I have a little bit different outfield than you. Right field, I went with Moises Alou. They were in some down times when Moises was playing with the Giants, but he gave us a chance. He gave us a shot. So I want to pay him back a little bit. And then in 2006 on the bench, kind of utility infielder, second baseman, Ray Durham. Also played across the bay in Oakland, so we like him. 2007 for center field, I went with Randy Wynn. Switch hitter, just play the field well, run well. He'll give you a good at bat. I like Randy Wynn. Another guy I looked at for center field, I can't remember what year he had a decent season, was Andres Torres. Another guy for the Giants. It might have been 2010.
I think so.
But another guy who just kind of seemed to be plugged in at the right time, and they got the absolute most out of him, and then nobody else really did. Let's see. Keep going. 2008 was my Lincecum year. 2009, I took Pablo Sandoval. 2010, I picked Jeremy Affeldt. I knew, looking at my relievers, I wanted to take either Affeldt or Javi Lopez in there somewhere to be my lefty specialist. It seemed like Bochy pushed all the right buttons with the two of them. 2011, this is a starter that you didn't have. I have Matt Cain. Matt Cain, I don't think got the wins that he ever really deserved. He went through a lot of years without run support, but he was always a guy that you could count on for a good outing and at least eating up some innings for you and fighting. 2012, he had his perfect game, but I got him playing in 2011 for us. 2012 was Buster Posey in his MVP year. I got Hunter Pence on my bench in 2013. 2014, I let my heart dictate. I took Yusmeiro Petit
Hmm.
in relief. Not a guy who had crazy numbers or is going to blow anybody away or had a ton of success with the Giants. But in 2014, you'll remember in the NLDS against the Washington Nationals, 18 inning extra inning game, he came in and pitched 6 scoreless innings of relief, and got the Giants through that series, which he'll forever be a hero for me. 2015, I took Sergio Romo. I know you didn't have him in your rotation, or in your relief, but that no dot slider, man. Oof. Strikes out Cabrera looking in 2014. Love Sergio Romo, another guy that decided to go down to the Dodgers after we didn't want him no more, which I get it. 2016 was my Madison Bumgarner year. 2017, I had to take a backup catcher, so I took Nick Hundley. Uh, you know, wasn't much going for the Giants in 2017, but he came out and played hard every day. And come on, let's be honest, Buster Posey's going to be the horse back there. We're not taking him out if we don't need to. Um, Another couple guys I thought of at catcher was Benji Molina, and I even went so far back as Benito Santiago in the 2002 season, the World Series season. And then wrapping it up in 2018, Derek Rodriguez. I just put him in long relief. He had a good year as a youngster starting, and then in 2019 I took Will Smith on the lefty side.
Yeah, definitely a lot of similarities, a lot of differences as well. I know you kind of beat me to it in some of the guys you got who I did not. You mentioned Ray Durham. He had a big year in 06. You know, in retrospect, I probably should have taken him over Klein in 06, so then found, you know, some bullpen help somewhere else. You know, neither of us got Bonds' big 73 home run year because we both took Aurelia. That was, you know, Rich Aurelia's, you know, only big season. And like we both mentioned, you know, Bonds, you can get him any year. Are there any other guys that, you know, that were not on either of our rosters?
You know, a big signing for the Giants, Barry Zito. He never really panned out, never really had those big years with the Giants. He did all his damage with the A's, but in 2012, he started Game 1 of the World Series for the Giants in a spot where, you know, they had to come back in a bunch of series, and their rotation was not where you wanted it to be going into a World Series. And he came in and pitched a great game and got them started. And then in that same playoff run, 2012, Vogelsong, total journeyman, never gave up on himself, never gave up on his career, and he reaped the rewards in the 2012 playoffs, going unbeaten.
Yeah, another one of those great finds for Sabian was Vogelsong. Some other guys that I, you know, thought had great years, but was unable to get them. Ellis Burks had a big year in '99, but you know, at some point I needed a backup catcher, so I took. That was the year that I was able to get Brent Maine, and yeah, I was not able to get Kirk Reeder on there. You did. I was not able to get Matt Cain. You know, one of the interesting things about the Giants, they had those 3 World Series wins in such a short time. And you would think that, you know, there would be like the same roster, you know, the Yankees and their dynasty in the late 90s, you know, it was a lot of the same guys there. But the Giants had 3 different aces on each of those World Series teams. You know, Lincecum was the ace in 2010. Kane was the ace in 2012, and then Bumgarner was the ace in 2014. So it's interesting to see in such a short time period that those 3 different aces led them there. And, you know, I would just didn't work out to get Kane on there. You know, I could have taken Kane in 09 and left Affeldt off. Then another guy who was not on either one of our rosters. I don't think you had. Did you have Brian Wilson?
No.
Yeah, see, I could have taken Wilson in 2010 over Huff. He was a guy. I think he saved each clinching game for the Giants in the postseason that year. And I know last week on the program I mentioned the great nickname that Vin gave to Sean Chacon, Mr. Excitement, but Brian Wilson seemed like that too. It seemed like he was 3-2 to every batter.
Yeah, he gave a lot of heart attacks to the fans, put you on the edge of your seat. Yeah, he thought he was going to walk every batter that came up.
Yeah, so that's those are the guys I missed out on. If anybody else wants to educate me on other guys I missed out on, if you want to give your opinion on who had the better roster, Matt or myself, go ahead. Again, the inbox is open, so go ahead and send those messages on social media at Boxy Banter on Twitter and Instagram. And, if you really want to prove me wrong, again, go ahead and make your own roster. Make one better than mine. It is time for the Q&A segment, and each week we open it up on Twitter and Instagram for our listeners to submit questions for us to get to on the podcast. So make sure to follow on both those platforms so you can watch for that to get those questions in. Our first question this week comes from Dave Barrow. He asks, who is the tallest and fattest giant, aka the giantest giant? So which player has played for the Giants who most accurately embodies their nickname of the Giants?
Well, can I make one for fattest and one for tallest?
All right, who do you got for each one? Can we get a tallest, a fattest, and then an all around maybe?
All around big.
Yeah.
What? So fattest has got to be Pablo Sandoval. I mean,
especially right now.
Yeah, I think there was the spring training picture, especially, and then a few years back, I think it was with Boston when he snapped his belt. So he's got to be fattest. Tallest would be Randy Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
In his brief
forgot about that.
Brief stint with the Giants.
Yes, he won his 300th game with the Giants. I forgot about that one. It's a good pull.
Tallest and fattest, I think you could maybe talk about Bonds at the very end of his career when he was just bloated up and full of water for who knows why. You decide maybe he was not eating healthy. I don't know. But he got pretty big there at the end. I don't know who you go with for those ones.
I don't know. I didn't think of Bonds. I think Bonds is probably a good call for overall. And I mean, there's really no arguing Randy Johnson. I mean, it's just tail of the tape. He's, I think, only like one or two guys in history taller than him. So yeah, that's a good call on tallest. And Pablo, I believe everybody knows there's been a bunch of jokes about that. I mean, didn't they send him to fat camp to try to lose weight at one point?
They did.
Yeah, so
he gets the most out of it, though. I give him that. He's one of those big guys that you wouldn't expect to be athletic. You run into him on the street, and you're like, you're not a Major League Baseball player.
Yeah, he's got that quickness, though. He actually caught a little bit coming up.
Yeah, when I was making my roster, I think very early on, I told you, I was like, I'm going to have Pablo Sandoval be my backup catcher. And you're like, yeah, well, good, but that's not really fair.
Yeah, I mean, I think Benji Molina is another guy who's pretty big.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, and our next question comes from Chris Heilman, who was a guest on the program a couple weeks ago talking about the Padres. He asks, can you make a case for the Giants-Dodgers being the best rivalry over, other rivalries like the Yankees-Red Sox, Cardinals-Cubs, or another big rivalry in baseball? What do you think? What do you think, Pat?
I mean, it's so near and dear to me that most of my opinions are going to come from times we've seen games. The rivalry for me was always there, but it became more real, especially when I went to Cal Poly, living with you, living with Captain, a couple Dodgers fans, and then having the local broadcast was always the Dodgers. So I was the odd man out, and that kind of gave me a steel reserve in terms of my feelings on the rivalry. I don't know that I could convince you that it's better than Yankees, Red Sox, but it just is to me because it means more to me. Yeah,
I'll make a case for that. I mean, the Yankees are obviously the most storied franchise in probably North American sports. There's no denying that they are, the best organization in baseball. They've got all those titles, and the Red Sox, I mean, early on, in those early 1900s with Babe Ruth, they were good. But then, they were nothing for a while. They had a couple pennants in like 67 and 75 in 86. But it wasn't really a fair match. Whereas the Dodgers and Giants, now there's 3 teams in Major League history to have won 11,000 games. 3 out of, all the 30 organizations currently in baseball have won at 11,000 games. Giants and Dodgers are 2 of them, along with the Chicago Cubs are the 3rd team. So, I mean, they both have had a lot of success. It was an intense rivalry in New York. They had a lot of, they went head to head. They were very good at the same time. And then the rivalry was able to sustain the move out west. And San Francisco and LA are already, a natural rivalry. Then you throw those 2 teams in there who hated each other. And so it's just natural. I think, you get the East Coast bias. Recently in 03 and 04, the Yankees and Red Sox had those matchups in the ALCS. The Dodgers and Giants have never met in the postseason. In 1962, they were tied and they had a 3-game playoff, I believe. And also in 1951, they were tied and had a 3-game playoff, but no postseason appearances against each other. So that might be an argument against it. But yeah, I think it's the best rivalry in baseball. Like you said, we're biased. We're here on the West Coast. We live it. We were there. You mentioned a great example of being in Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, which is pretty much right in the middle. So we had it from both sides. If listeners, you want to chime in, maybe we'll put that as a question out there. What's the best rivalry? But
I do like your point too, though, about it sustaining the move from New York and the rivalry existing in New York before it came to the West Coast. That for sure is a unique circumstance. And, I feel like this might have been a little strategic for you to record this when you did, because had you recorded it a few weeks back, you wouldn't have been able to say that there was 3 teams with 11,000 wins. Is that correct?
Yeah, the Dodgers got their 11,000th like a week or 2 ago.
And I mean, you conveniently left out, but who has the most?
Is it the Cubs?
No.
Oh, it's the Giants, huh?
No, it's the Giants by a long way, and I think the Cubs only recently reached that milestone too.
Mm-hmm. And again, I mean, these 3 teams do have the advantage because they are National League teams. Let's not forget about that. The National League is the older league, so these teams have had more years playing at that level, whereas the Yankees and other American League teams don't have that advantage. But, that is something that they have that they can hang their hat on that the Yankees, Red Sox, and other American League teams cannot.
Listen, man, when you've gone through some of the more recent years that the Giants have, I'll take any advantage I can get.
Well, yes.
We're sitting having to watch you guys go to the World Series every single year, and we can't even get anywhere near 80 wins, 70 wins. That'd be, I don't know. It's been lean, but we're sticking with them. They're overperforming this year, and we love it.
Yeah, even when the teams have not been good at the same time, they've managed to, be a thorn in each other's side. And like those games, it doesn't matter how good the Dodgers are and how bad the Giants are, or how good the Giants are and how bad the Dodgers are. Like those games are always interesting.
Yeah, they are.
So yeah, if that's what I think on that question. So that's a great question. Thanks for that. Listeners, if you guys want to chime in with your thoughts on that, go ahead and do that. And I have one last bit of, I got a piece of trivia I will ask you, Matt. So when the new stadium was built Do you know where they got home plate?
No idea.
They actually transported it from the stick. They got by helicopter. They helicoptered it over from the stick to put it into the new stadium there. I guess at that time it was Pac Bell Park.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that was that one. And again, listeners, make sure to follow us on social media, on Twitter and Instagram, to get those questions in at Boxy Banter on both of those platforms. Matt, it's time to grade the roster. So let's, put it to the test. What do you think of this roster for the Giants that I've assembled? Some of the strengths and weaknesses that it might have. What do you got on it?
Yeah, the first thing I'll say is that this is not an easy task. I don't know. I would encourage your listeners that haven't done it, pick your favorite team and try to do it. It is not easy to try to make things line up just right, and you have to cut people that you would rather keep. But I think you did a really good job. Me just trying to get my WAR up as high as yours for the Giants was a difficult task. I don't think I was able to do it, and I think I just gave up and went with guys I cared about. The strengths, I mean, I think your starting pitching is lights out. I think your bullpen is lights out. And then, these are all-star teams. So these guys are going to rake. They're going to hit well. They're going to hit for average. And, you got to consider how these teams are going to hold up against all the other all-time teams that you've made. And, the Giants have a history of overperforming and getting the most out of their guys. And I think that they're going to do it again. And I think that this is the best roster you've made so far, Billy.
So you give it an A?
Of course, man.
Yes, as I go over my rosters, I grade it. I think, you get some offense out of some unpredictable spots with Posey, with Jeff Kent, even Rich Aurelia there is short. But they've kind of got to carry the load because, you're not getting a lot of production out of first. Aside from Bonds, you're not getting much production in the outfield. So it's tough to really see, Bonds is such a unique player, that power, the on base, the average, all of that. So he can really carry a team. And, when he was doing this back in the early 2000s, he was, he didn't have a lot of help on that team. And this team, he'll have a little more with Posey. He had Jeff Kent and Aurelia, but Posey definitely is another big help. So it's tough to really guess how he would do with this roster. But yeah, there are some shortcomings in some of the other positions. Yeah, you mentioned the pitching staff. Like I mentioned earlier, Jason Schmidt, I don't think he gets enough credit for how good he was at that time. And Timmy Lincecum, 2 Cy Youngs. He was lightning in a bottle. He didn't have the longest career, but when he was there, he got a lot out of it. Bumgarner, solid, not spectacular. Great in the postseason, absolutely. And we'll see how he would do here. But very solid starter. Cueto, unpredictable. He's like, all that shimmying that he does. He's crazy to watch. Sean Estes out of the 5 spot in the rotation. Dependable, but some of the other teams out there are able to line up like 5 aces almost. So decent starting rotation. The bullpen, I agree, strong bullpen. As a whole, this team, they've got good rate stats. Defense is not great. At backup shortstop with Crawford, you got a lot very good defense there. Good defense out of the catching position, but outside of that, not great. But so all of that, the pros and the negatives, I give them a C. They're a nice solid C. You mentioned, they got the most out of it in big situations. So they're very opportunistic, and they, may be able to sneak a few more wins out of that. So that's what I give them. If you want to go ahead and chime in, grading the roster, go ahead. Let me know. Let me have it. Matt, it is time to wrap up. So I will offer it to you first. What are your final thoughts on the Giants?
Final thoughts are: it has always been Pac-Bell Park, Oracle Park, whatever you want to call it, has always been a great venue for the family. I mentioned in 2002 I was able to go to that World Series with my best friend. It was Game 5, and if you'll remember, that was Dusty Baker's son ran out to home plate to collect the bat and almost got run over full speed by JT Snow.
I think he plays for Cal now.
Really?
Yeah, Darren Baker, right? I think he plays for the Cal Golden Bears.
Very nice. Well, it didn't affect him too much. He stuck with it. 2010, I was able to take my wife to the World Series with me, watch that band of misfits, that band of underdogs, do the impossible. 2012 at the NLCS, I was able to pay back my father, my stepfather, and my brother for all the games they took me to as a kid. And I took them to Game 7, stayed every minute in the pouring rain, watching Marco Scudero catch the last out, watching Hunter Pence with the broken bat single where the bat hit the ball twice.
3 times, I think.
Maybe even 3. And then in 2014, I got to go and watch Game 4 of the World Series with my mom and my wife. So when I think of the Giants, I think of all the fun times I've been able to have with family, with great friends. I know you came up to a game with me in San Francisco, and that was a great time. It doesn't disappoint. I know it's cold, but it's a park worth seeing. Any of your listeners, come up to San Francisco, take the train up, give yourself a 6-pack, keep it under your seat, have a sandwich, get a little heater going before you get to the game so you don't have to buy those $14 beers. And I still think that we got a better hot dog than LA.
Well, now as I talk about the Giants as I close, we've mentioned it already. They won the pennant in 2002, and then those 3 World Series wins in 2010, 12, and 14. It's interesting because, each of those teams looked different from each other. The team in 2002, it was top heavy with Bonds. And then like everyone else who just kind of filled in the roster and everything. Whereas, 2010, 12, and 14, they didn't necessarily have that star power. Posey was the MVP in 2012, but they weren't as you mentioned, that band of misfits. It was just like a bunch of random guys that came together. And I mentioned earlier also that, they had different aces each year. So it was interesting to watch how, that even year magic found lightning in a bottle each year. Not your normal recipe for success, but something that was very interesting to watch. And I don't know if we'll ever see something like that again. With most teams after a window of contention, you mentioned Sabian selling guys to acquire guys, and it worked out well for them. They won those titles, but it's tough to maintain that window. And we've seen that in the past few years where they've had a drop off and they've been in rebuilding mode. And now it's going to be interesting to see what they're able to do with Farhan at the helm. Will he be able to turn them into a serious contender to really build something up again? He's had that experience in successful organizations in Oakland, in LA. So we will see what the Giants look like going forward. But I'm sure that all Giants fans are happy with that trade-off that, they had that great success and then they had to trade it for, those few down years. I'm sure any fan base would take that trade-off. So Matt, it has been a pleasure to have you here to talk baseball on this kayak here in McCovey Cove. But I think it's time to get off the water and go inside and get warmed up.
Yeah, man, I think the seagulls are circling and the game is over. Thank you for having me.
All right, it's been fun. This is Billy Ballas of Box Seat Banter signing off.